So the last day of March has passed, meaning the final call will be made in April this month. Let's turn to Professor Lee Hee-eun for more this morning. Welcome back, Professor Lee.
Well, thanks for having me on the program.
Good morning. There are calls that the Constitutional Court should issue a statement and explain the reasons for such a long delay. Isn't that rare for the court to issue an explanation?
Absolutely. The court is not really in the business of making announcements about, why there's a delay in the ruling because, for several reasons. Most specifically, you want to avoid speculation and misinformation. The court is in the business of making decisions, and I know everyone is very curious, court watchers and as well as pundits. And the media, of course, is very keenly interested in when the court is going to actually release its decision. But the fact that there's been a delay, everyone's speculating as to the reasons why. And so if the court goes ahead and makes an announcement at this point about and tries to explain the delay, I think that will cause a lot of confusion in terms of what the court is trying to accomplish, which is essentially to make the decision as to whether or not President Yoon should be removed from office. And so it's highly unlikely that the court would come out with a specific explanation as to providing the reasons for why the court has yet at this point delayed its ruling on the decision on Yoon's impeachment.
Well, some of the experts I've talked to, they say Yoon's case is not as complicated as that of former President Park Geun-hye. They've expressed, frustration over the delay. I'd like to hear what's your take on this?
Right. As you noted, a lot of people have thought maybe this was a slam dunk case. Basically, this should be an 8-0 decision. But as people have sort of gone through and thought through as to, the reasons why there's a delay, that there's speculation, of course, that this case is more complicated, maybe more than it seems on its face, because, when judges come to a decision like this, obviously a very politically highly charged case, but also potentially, certain legal complications may arise. There's been talk, at least among legal scholars, that this case could potentially be dismissed by a certain number of the judges. And, obviously, when you think about this case, you think about progressive judges, you may think of conservative judges, think about what those judges are, focusing on in terms of their understanding of the case and its implications for not just the legal implications, but obviously also for the political implications. And so, and then I think in this case, the delay is actually indicating that there's more complications here than it meets the eye. And I think that's where we're at right now with this particular decision.
Well, that is why a ruling date is still up in the air. But I have to ask, as a legal expert's point of view, when do you think the court will or maybe must announce a ruling date to prevent any more confusion, instability, and impatience among people?
Yeah, that's a difficult question in some part because, the court can obviously take its time, but, there's that time window, 180 days. And now we're not just talking about that deadline, but we're also talking about the impending retirements of two justices on the 18th of April. So if the court is going to make a decision at this point, it's going to have to make it before the 18th when the two justices will have to retire because their terms are over. But a point of fact, if the court is unable to come to some consensus, and my assumption is that there's really furious discussion happening within the court as to the merits as to why President Yoon should be impeached or why he shouldn't. And if the court's desires to achieve consent or at least some unanimity, then this may take longer than we expect. But at some point, the court's going to have to make a decision. So the best guess, of course, at this point is that before the two justices will have to retire, that's when the court will make its decision. So we can look forward maybe to potentially before the 18th of April.
And the opposition Democratic Party has designated today, April 1st, as the deadline for Prime Minister Han Duck-soo to appoint Justice nominee Ma Eun-hyuk. And they were warning that it would make a major decision if Han doesn't appoint Ma. Does that mean another impeachment motion, the Prime Minister Han Duck-soo?
Well, certainly it's possible, but it's hard to imagine that he'd be impeached again, given the fact that he was, of course, vindicated by the court. So
Right.
the fact that they would actually try to do this again, I think, had obviously severe political implications. But the legal side of things, the court has already said that while it was unconstitutional for him to not appoint Judge Ma to the bench, that the court was not in a position to force the prime minister, the acting president in this case, to make that appointment. So I think they're basically posturing at this point in terms of threatening impeachment because I don't think it's going to happen. And also, if it goes back, I think the political damage to the Democratic Party would be severe.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong here. It looks highly unlikely that Han will appoint Ma. But let's say Han does appoint Ma. Can Ma play an active role in the ruling? And if so, to what extent do you think?
I mean, he wouldn't be able to unless they sort of reintroduced all the evidence and he was present for the hearings. I mean, at this point, his involvement, his appointment would really have no impact on the decision of the impeachment because he was not involved in any of the deliberative processes, but also the investigations itself. So I don't anticipate that he would, if he was on the bench, that he would play a role in the actual decision.
Alrighty, Professor Lee, it was good to have you with us again. Thank you so much for taking your time to be with us this morning. We appreciate it.
My pleasure always.